seeing on a regular basis. Ebola as it threatens us, and note how when it's on our doorstep it gets so much more profile within the media. Going back a bit further, looking at the Costa Concordia disaster, this completely rocked the travel industry, certainly in the cruise sector. So is it an appropriate time to talk about cruise when all this is going on or not? And these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves. And then, of course, we've got Kim Kardashian, who wants to break the internet. I don't know about you, but I think her bottom alone could probably break the internet. But I bring Kim up because I think she's actually quite fascinating. She's the second most followed person on Instagram. Does anybody know who the first is? It's Justin Bieber. She's got 25 million followers on Instagram, and she really knows how to manipulate the media and get full attention. And it's kind of interesting that for the ultimate mark of celebrity profile being raised as high as possibly could be, the pinnacle is to break the internet. Is it possible? I certainly see that all of the memes and the imitations of this photo shoot are potentially going to break the internet, perhaps not Kim herself. What's also interesting is that this publication, Paper, was relatively unknown before she did the shoot. So actually the media itself, they've benefited just as much as she has. A very interesting relationship. So a little bit about Travelzoo. Hands up who's heard of Travelzoo? Okay. The brand awareness is working then, that's good to see. So Travelzoo is a global company. We were established in 1998. We launched the same year as Google and eBay. And we were founded by two German brothers, Ralph and Holger Bartel. Ralph and Holger were journalists originally, wine connoisseurs, and they wrote about the wine industry. And they built Travelzoo because essentially what they realized was that the internet was a huge opportunity for businesses, but also for consumers to find out information relatively easily. However, we need a filter when it comes to travel. I don't know about you, but I don't want to spend 3 or 4 hours researching every travel deal that I go on. And so Travelzoo exists really to act as that filter. We have teams of real people around the world who spend hours researching and testing every deal. And we do mystery shopping. Oh, what's happened to the screen? Sorry. I don't want a video. Open-ended. Hodges. What we do is we mystery shop deals. So when companies want to feature in Travelzoo, what we do is we phone up and we see if that deal really is as good as the company says it is. And if it is as good as they say it is, then it goes into our publications. And we share those deals with 27 million people around the world, 7 million of them in Europe and 4 million in the UK. We have a very, very popular website with over 108 million unique visitors. That's all the numbers about Travelzoo. What we really do is we want to inspire people to get up off the sofa and explore the deal, explore the world one amazing deal at a time. And this is our recent ad campaign in London, and we actually featured real Travelzoo subscribers, and we recruited those people from social media channels to feature in the ad. So this is all about Wednesdays, and why Wednesdays? Well, on Wednesday at 11 o'clock, so about half an hour, the top 20 comes out. It's a roundup of the very best deals every week, and that's from cruise deals to long-haul deals to overnight stays in hotels. And we believe, having spoken to our audience, they get very excited about 5 to 11 when the top 20 comes in. So we wanted to capture that excitement in this campaign, and that's what we've done. These people are so ready to go on holiday, they're actually half-dressed to head off. So a little bit about me. So I've been in the communications industry for 15 years. I started out also in 1998, same year that Google and eBay was founded. And my first job was to work as a researcher in East Berlin on a film script, and involved travelling all over the Eastern Bloc and interviewing people to make sure all these people were real characters and they would really resonate with the reader. So that gave me my first spark of interest in how important the narrative is and how important it is to have a compelling story. Second job was working in tech PR at the time of the potential millennium bug. And these were the days when journalists had boozy lunches. I got my first newspaper cover by taking out a journalist for a coffee after he'd had a rather boozy lunch. And my client at the time was a rather dull back-end integration software company. And the journalist fell asleep during the coffee. And so we sat there for about 20 minutes thinking, what should we do? Should we wake the journalist up or should we just leave? Eventually he woke up after about 20 minutes, and he was so mortified that he'd fallen asleep during the interview that we ended up getting a great cover story. But suffice to say that it was all about actually engaging that journalist with a compelling story and doing the follow-up. And he did a story on the fact that companies were basically asleep at the wheel, heading towards the 2000 date change and towards the potential cliff edge without even realizing it. So again, the narrative is really important. Now, a couple of years ago, before I joined Travelzoo, I took a career break. I think a lot of women, a lot of people who take a career break find it quite difficult because they lose confidence, and you think, well, what have I missed out there? What's happened while I haven't been in the scene, in the communications industry? And so I asked a lot of my friends and industry peers, what's the one thing that I've missed between the years 2007 and 2009? And everybody said social media. And at the time, I was using social media to post cute photos of my newborn babies, like all new mums do. But that was kind of how I saw it. It was a place to actually interact with friends. It was not a place for companies to play. And so I looked at about 90 companies' Facebook pages, and I have to say that 95% of them were extremely dull. And I think that it's really important that we remember this as companies, that people see Facebook as a fairly personal space, and it's not a place that's really appropriate to sell to people on. So we have to be very clever, again, in terms of how we use our company's narrative to really engage the consumer in that environment. And you cannot just put up salesy marketing messages because you'll get zero interaction. So here I am today, and these are the lessons I've learned, and I have to say that I did feel like I'd missed out a bit, but at the same time, not that much has changed. I think that the message and the narrative is still as important as ever, if not more important today than it was before social media. So here's the landscape that we operate in as marketers and communication professionals. The media are incredibly time poor, and I think the internet really is a beast for media to satisfy. We've met at Travelzoo several leading daily newspapers, online teams, and they're telling us that quite often the print version has got a team of, say, 5 or 6 people doing the travel pages, but the online team is maybe 2 people, job sharing. And it's crazy, you know, they've got to turn out 300, 400 stories a week. The news is 24 hours, 7 days a week. Everybody's more interested in the comment section than they are the news article, so they've got to also navigate the waters of joining in with the comments and maybe changing the copy to reflect what people are telling them. So it's a very complicated area for journalists and very challenging for them to actually create the content that is engaging. I've also found out that journalists are now almost bonused financially sometimes about getting onto the homepage. So, you know, being in the right rail of shame on certain titles is absolute gold dust for a lot of journalists because they're seen within their team as actually having the most impact on the reader. So journalists themselves are working in a very competitive environment, and we as communications professionals have to give them content and stories that will help them get onto that first page and stay above the fold when it comes to their articles staying online. So the shift to digital is really important for journalists to get abreast of as well. We've got quite a lot of analog journalists from the era when it was just a print medium trying to operate in this space as well. And I think that as digital professionals, we can help them with that. Also for companies, in terms of getting their brand, not have to spend too much on paid search. You know, we're all frightened of the Google police catching us out and having bad links. And so having good, strong links to titles like the older players, to Mail Online, Telegraph Online, is more important than ever. I spend a lot of time trying to decide whether to spend my budget on interacting with bloggers or whether to talk to real journalists, some people call them. And I have to say that in terms of search ranking and getting positive feel-good factor around the Travelzoo brand, there's no doubt that it's still the original players who are just online who are having the most impact for us as a brand. And the other thing that I think has changed is that we need to create content that's not just a press release or just text, but actually really interesting content that journalists can use and post up straight away, high-quality video. Sometimes high-quality video isn't the right medium. Sometimes it's something shot on an iPhone that captures the moment and looks real is what journalists want. So it's really understanding what kind of content is appropriate. Some interesting things happening in the retail space as well, where retailers and e-commerce companies are becoming publishers. For me, the pinnacle of success in this area is Net-a-Porter. I think they're the trailblazers. I think it's really interesting they've brought out an online magazine where you can read about the brands, and again, it's the narrative. They're not just selling clothes and shoes and beautiful stuff. They're actually selling stories about the designers behind these brands and making people really engage with the aspirational characters that are behind what are essentially just consumable products. It's interesting that they brought out an online title called The Edit, but that they've also brought out an offline version called Porter. hard copy glossy magazine. There's a resurgence at the moment of print coming back in fashion. It's not that everything has to go digital and that's the end of the line. Actually, print has still got its place. And certainly in the luxury sector, where people want to pick up something glossy and feel the weight of that high gloss paper before they buy their £2,000 handbag, that is the appropriate medium for that message. So Porter describes itself as combining the intimacy of print with the instant gratification that technology allows, meaning that you can shop everything that inspires you directly from the page in two ways, either through the innovative digital edition or with the free Net-a-Porter app. So they're actually going out there and saying, we're launching a print magazine, it costs quite a lot of money, we're expecting people to sit on the sofa with their iPad and shop directly from the magazine. It's a really interesting development. They've essentially taken the old-fashioned Next catalogue from the 1990s, sexed it up a lot, and they're now competing with Vogue. Airbnb, another disruptor in the market. So they're part of the sharing economy. They just launched an offline print magazine. Again, it's very glossy, it costs £9 a copy. That's a lot of money to spend on a magazine. It'll be interesting to see how they compete in this space. And interesting for us as brands to see how we can feature in these kind of magazines. So the Daily Mail, is it the ultimate PR coup to be in there, or is it actually potentially going to trash your brand? Well, at Travelzoo, we kind of believe that you need a mix, really, of having emotive content that tells a really compelling story about your brand, but also this bread and butter coverage has a huge impact for us. They've got 170 million unique users. A lot of that audience is in Australia and in the US. It's a global audience. And the secret to getting in here, I think we've finally cracked it. We basically need to talk about celebrities in some way, and you need to be very good at list building. So we do things like a roundup of the world's sexiest beaches, but it's got to be timely. So when we issued this story, it was the first day of the World Cup, and of course top of the list of beaches was Ipanema Beach in Rio. So it's about having timeliness, relevance, and understanding what kind of content the media want. You know, they don't want a list of 500 things, they just want short, snappy lists with nice pictures. The story on the right is about celebrities behaving badly in hotels around the world. And because we create content is about hotels, obviously it's important for us to be associating Travelzoo with hotels in terms of search online. So this kind of story works really well for us. Again, timeliness is around the time that Beyonce's sister had the argument with Jay-Z in the lift. So the Mail were interested in this because it was tagging on to something that's happening in the news as well. So it's not just about content, it's about timeliness. Very, very important. So our strategy really for communications is what we call mad, sad or glad. And it goes, every story that we think about creating, every piece of content that we think about putting out there, we say to ourselves, does it make me feel mad, sad or glad? And if it doesn't make me feel any of these things, then the story doesn't get released. And I think it's important to refer to Maya Angelou's quote that people will often forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never ever forget how you made them feel. So it's about having consumers walk away from your brand and actually feel something, rather than just knowing all the facts and figures. So to give you an example of how this works, so we will have typically an umbrella campaign that will run for about 6 to 12 months, and this will be our hero content. And in the case of Travelzoo, we launched a campaign a year and a half ago called Parent Trap, which I'll tell you more about shortly. And this is all supported by the likes of the Mail Online lists and the AOL picture stories. And when we do have a product launch, we don't just say, hey, we're launching a new product. We tell a story behind it. So we're going to launch a hotel booking engine, and we're going to start actually taking the transaction directly from the consumer next year. And so rather than just say we're launching a hotel booking engine, which journalists don't really care about, we'll be creating stories and content about hotels, like what is the future of a hotel look like? How does the hotel future-proof itself from a technology point of view for the consumer? These kind of stories are what make it much more interesting than just talking about product launches. So this is how we communicate our core values. We make all our stories newsworthy, and we need to entertain, inform, and delight people. So essentially, companies need to believe in something. It's no longer good enough to just say we exist and we do important stuff. You need to stand up for something. You need to have a core message that is going to have some real resonance on an emotive level. Often issues-based things really work. What issues can your company get behind? Have a look at what's happening out there. What are people worried about? What are people's deepest fears? If you can tap into those and make them feel happy, relieved, angry, have some emotive response, you're going to be a lot more impactful than just talking about yourself. And also think about, are these issues and stories you want to talk about. Are they global, are they national, or are they local, regional stories? All of them have a time and a place and an appropriate form of media. And remember the circles of proximity. So what are the circles of proximity? I met a very intelligent French journalist a couple of months ago who told me about this, and he said, there's a reason why if 200,000 people die in a flood on the other side of the world, it doesn't make it onto the front page of Le Monde. It's because there are no French people involved in that tragedy. Well, that sounds really callous, but actually when you think about it, it's true. People only care about things that in some way are connected to them. And so it really is all about you when you read the paper. That's why the horoscopes are one of the most well-read sections of the paper. It's the only part of the paper that's actually about you. And so when we create a story, we have to think about that person sitting at home. What are they worried about? They're worried about something that's related to them or their family and their friends, things that are within their circle of proximity. And the closer we can get into that circle, the more impact we will have. So one way to express how to do this in practical terms is to have hero and hygiene content. So the hero content is your big campaign, it's your tugging on the heartstrings story that's going to have people thinking about you in a way that goes beyond your products and services. And the hygiene content is giving people useful, informative information. Typically it'll be things like how-to videos, and they work really well, as I'll show you in a minute. I think my favorite example of hero content in recent history is the Dove Real Beauty campaign. I'm going to try and make this video work.
I'm a forensic artist. Work for the San Jose Police Department.
While working at the tech issues, can you come to the front? Anyone at the back of the standing?
There's some seats here if you want to sit down. There was a guy with a drafting board.
We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Tell me about your hair.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
It kind of protrudes a little bit, especially when I smile.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
What would be your most prominent feature?
Kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
I would say I have a pretty big forehead.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin, it was a nice, thin chin.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke.
Cute nose.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
So here we go. This is the sketch that you helped me create, and that's a sketch that somebody described of you.
So yeah, that's...
She looks closed off and fatter, sadder too. The second one looks more open, friendly, and happy.
I should be more grateful of my natural beauty. It impacts the choices and friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
We spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right.
and we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
Quite an emotive piece there. And what's really important is they're not just trying to sell you shower gel and shampoo, they're actually trying to address a real issue they've identified out there, which is women's body dysmorphia and issues with how they see themselves. So I think it's really important that companies remember this sort of thing really works because it goes on for a bit longer than a product release. This is about talking about something that affects people on a daily basis. And what's also really important is that the company has to really believe in this. It has to be genuine. Consumers are very, very cynical nowadays, and they can see through something that is just done for a PR reason very, very easily. And then this is an example of some great hygiene content. So B&Q's how-to videos are their most successful marketing activity to date in many respects. They regularly rack up about 70,000 views for every video they issue. And what's really important with these videos is that they're showing the company message is about making people a better home, a happier home, all of those feel-good things, but in a really practical way. How to do stuff is one of the most searched terms on the internet. And so they've been very clever in doing this and actually showing local builders and plumbers and people talking about the problems that they have in helping people at home as well. So a great campaign from B&Q. So thought leadership really does drive brands. In fact, I would argue it's as important in terms of affecting the stock price as a speech or a presentation that a CEO does. And I think it's really about engaging your consumers in a way that really communicates to the heart, but also sticks to the company's core values and missions. Another great example is WestJet Airlines, a very small Canadian regional airline, who did a really nice story about getting people home for Christmas and using technology to actually personalize the consumer experience.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up.
I regard myself.
This is not the video I want to show you. I'm not very technically able in spite of my background. Apologies.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up.
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Sorry, that video is not loading. So anyway, basically what happens here is people take a flight and they have a barcode scanner in the airport and they capture consumer information so that the passengers, while they're traveling, they've told Santa on a screen what kind of present they want for Christmas. And when they get to their destination, on a conveyor belt, not only their luggage arrives, but also all the presents they've told Santa, the digital Santa that they want. It's a very touching story, and I urge all of you to check it out. So Mad, Sad or Glad in action. So what have we done at TravelZoom? We launched a campaign in July 2013 called The Parent Trap. And I think what's really interesting about this campaign is that we picked up on something that was happening in the consumer universe, which was Michael Gove came out with a new legislation, which means that parents cannot take their children out of school during term time anymore for a family holiday without potentially being issued a fine. So it was a news event that happened out there, and we looked at that as a company and said, well, what's that going to do in terms of impacting travel prices? How will this affect the consumer? And our hypothesis was that travel pricing would probably go up, and that the family market would be hit very badly by this. So we launched a petition and we asked the government to consider removing flight tax for all flights during the school summer holidays, so that parents who do the right thing and don't take their children out of school during term time would be somehow financially rewarded. So the Parent Trap is made up of these three elements. One is this new legislation that came into effect, where parents can then be fined. The second is the fact that we have the highest fly tax in the world in the UK. It's called Air Passenger Duty, APD. And the third aspect is the fact that flight prices and holiday prices will go up as a result of this new legislation. So we put together this campaign, we launched the petition, and we started building up consumer awareness of the fact that this new law was coming into effect. We found out that about 75% of parents didn't even know about this new law and that they could be fined. And then we did the same survey about 6 months later to find out if parents would be willing to lie in order to take their children on holiday and not get a fine. So we created some really interesting content in terms of news angles for the media. We created a video, we created some really cool infographics to tell the story in a pictorial way. And we actually were invited to attend a debate at the House of Commons about this. And it was the second most highly attended debate after the Scottish referendum vote. So it was pretty heavy hitting, and it was the first time that as a company we've been invited to talk to political affairs writers, education editors, as well as travel writers. And it just goes to show that if you broaden the net and you make your story relevant to many different sectors, then you can have a lot more impact than just staying within your sector. And it also helped to showcase that we are consumer champions and that we have consumer interests at heart and are interested in bringing down the cost of travel for families. It gave us an opportunity to actually appear on broadcast, Sky News, ITV, BBC. And in terms of search rankings, we saw a lot of traffic coming to our site from coverage on the BBC homepage and the Times and also Guardian, who featured us. I think that it was quite interesting that happened in this campaign as well, as we looked at the impact of digital coverage versus print coverage. I went to a debate a couple of weeks ago, which was around "Are newspapers dead?" I think it's a bit of a silly debate, because actually, of course, people want to read the news. Newspapers will never die. I think the thing that will change is that they will probably all become online digital. I think that stands to reason. But I just want to tell you about some coverage, the impact that we saw from the coverage. We appeared in the Evening Standard print edition and online. And I have to say that I've never had so many calls and tweets and messages from friends and colleagues than I've had from this one article here, which is in the print edition. So it really showed me just firsthand that we can look at traffic and we can analyse it ad infinitum, but actually there's nothing better than having 20 phone calls from friends and colleagues in one day saying I saw that article. That doesn't happen to me when we get articles online. So it's an interesting thing in terms of the impact and the resonance of coverage and where people see that coverage and how much of it they actually retain. It also became the biggest story in the travel industry for a while. We were on the front page, made my boss a cover star for the first time, which isn't a bad thing, in Travel Weekly. And crucially, we managed to get coverage not just in the Mail travel section, but actually in the hard news section of the Mail online. So for once, we weren't just talking about celebrities and nice beaches, but actually we were talking about some really serious, meaty issues in the media. And so since the campaign began, we've reached over 450 million people in the UK through 80 print and online stories, 35 radio interviews and 8 TV appearances. What's really important for us is that it cemented our position as an industry thought leader and trailblazer and really a consumer champion, which is exactly where we want to be. And we created a little video where we canvassed parents' opinions about this law and about how they feel about it. And that really gave us some digital content as well that we could use on our own sites and get people to engage with the story on YouTube and Facebook. So just to conclude then, I think there are 5 things that are really important for marketeers today to think about. I think it's really important to have an interesting story to tell about your brand. It goes beyond maybe your sector or your area of expertise, but taps into what people are worrying about right now, what's happening in the macro environment. It has to be relevant, really important that it's timely. When you issue these stories, it's of critical importance to their success. It has to be emotive. And think about how you deploy that story, what's the right medium to use. And also, who are the right media partners to contact first and give the story to exclusively? Perhaps you want to be in the political pages. Perhaps you really want to stay out of them as much as possible. And finally, one last tip. Take some risks, have fun and make it memorable, because life is too damn short to do otherwise. Thank you. Sorry about the technical glitches. Any questions? So the question was, a lot of companies are quite fearful and nervous about talking about issues that might be a bit controversial. And how do you get your managers and the senior people in the company to buy into it? I think I'd say to that, well, it has to be right for your brand. It's not about publicity for publicity's sake. And we actually sat around the table and said, what do we want to get behind in this petition? And we decided we didn't want to say people should take their children out of school and go on holiday, because that's not a right place for Travelzoo to sit. It's not up to us to take that position. The one thing we can influence as being in the travel industry is things like taxation on flights. So we picked something that would not make us look like we were talking about something we don't know anything about, but also something that we can actually affect some change within. And that was the only way that we could make it feel right. I think it's important that the whole company gets behind it, certainly senior management, otherwise it will fall apart at the seams. Any other questions? Okay. Have a great day. Oh, go come over there. So the question was, did we see any increase in sales as a result of the parent trap? The answer is we saw an increase in clients wanting to work with us because they've seen a lot of the press coverage. We don't actually take direct sales from the consumer. The way Travelzoo works is like a marketing platform for travel companies. We saw a lot more traffic to the website. There were peaks certainly around the broadcast coverage. We saw an increase in subscribers, and we've seen an increase in brand awareness by about 5%. Okay, if anybody would like the presentation, then please leave your business card with Marilyn. And if anyone has any other questions, then feel free to email Marilyn as well. We'll be happy to answer them offline. Thanks very much.